Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala khatamil anbiya. This is our second topic in the series of Islamic thought and world culture. We have covered in first discussion what do we understand by these two terms, and now we are still trying to further explore how we define Islamic thought. Islamic thought can be defined as fruit of interaction of human reason and intellect, or what the Quran calls aql, fahm, shaur, ilm, fikr, tafaqquh, tadabbur, ta'bir, with ultimate source of knowledge or wahi, leading to production of Islamized knowledge. This very simple statement helps you in finding out how we define Islamic thought, which means that if an idea, an elaboration, or a social construct contains two aspects: first, intellectual, rational analysis, and secondly, its interaction with divine revelation, then the product is supposed to be Islamic thought. If Ibn Khaldun or Ibn Rushd, with their beautiful Islamic name, simply repeat what is said by John Doe, their repeating it with a Muslim name does not make it Islamic. But Islamic thought means when all rational tools are interacting with divine revelation, there is an evidence of their interaction. Only then the product can be called Islamic thought. Now that makes this very simple statement very widely applicable. For example, a devout Christian, a Buddhist, even an atheist, if he is talking about honesty and fairness, adl, and frame of reference is that adl should be for all human beings without any gender, color, race consideration, and that tallies with the Quranic statement, then his product cannot be called un-Islamic. And if a Muslim with a nice beard and a turban is just repeating what John Stuart Mill or Claude Lévi-Strauss or Rousseau or anyone has said and has no reference with the Wahi, then with all Islamic appearance, it cannot be Islamic thought. Unfortunately, we have been reading a history in which persons whose names are very impressive, but they have conveyed exactly no different than Platonism, Neoplatonism, Aristotelian thought of Aristotle given by a Muslim scholar does not make it Islamic. Therefore, Al-Farabi and many others who have been ranked highly by Muslim historians and Muslim scholars just reproduce what is said by Greek philosophers. That does not make it Islamic.
जितने एलिमेंट्स हैं इंटेलेक्ट के, कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो हमारे इंटेलेक्ट से बाहर है, फिर भी हम क्योंकि जो ना हमारा सोर्स ऑफ है वो तो वहाँ पे कुछ चीज़ें हमारी अक्ल शऊर उनसे बाला भी है, फिर भी हम उसको तस्लीम कर लेते हैं. मतलब दीज एलिमेंट्स के अलावा भी जो हमारी समझ में नहीं आती और हम कहते हैं ये अल्लाह तबारक अल्लाह की तरफ से है, तो ये भी इस्लामिक उसमें हम शामिल कर लेते हैं. इन एलिमेंट्स के अलावा
we will deal more in detail with it in our next discourse, which will be Islamic epistemology, Islamic theory of knowledge. What is knowledge? What you are saying is very simple, that intellectually when I read a book or listen to a lecture where intellectual analysis is done, then it is intellectual discourse. But when I sit with a spiritualist who, based on his spiritual experience, gives a discourse, or he has an extra sensory perception, ESP, and based on that saying something, can we verify it empirically? We cannot. Rationally, we cannot. Should we call it knowledge, Islamized or not? I will still leave it as a question.
So according to this definition, it appears that in order to any thought to be labeled as an Islamic or Islamized thought, the interaction with Wahi is necessary, and without this interaction seems to be fundamental to every Islamic thought. My question is that there are so many things that the Westerners present as their own truth without having ever interacted with the Wahi. There are certain universal truths, like for example, Adl Insaf is a universal value. It is respected equally by the East as well as the West. There are so many people who would promote Adl Insaf without having any interaction with Wahi. Do we still call it Islamized? Because that probably is not underpinned by an interaction with Wahi.
Very important question. You see, when we talk about concepts, it is difficult to say that concepts are monopoly or property of one tradition or the other. From the day humanity was created, there are certain norms which have been practiced even by those who don't believe in God. What makes thought Islamic is not that just presence of that thought, but its interaction with revelation, which means when a Chinese or an American claims that we are observing human right or justice, the problem will lie how he understands human rights or justice and how he defines it. If adl or justice for an American means endorsement by a Congress or a Senate, or by a community of 95 PhDs who sit together and say this is in our view adl and justice, it may have apparent similarity with some Islamic principles, still it is not Islamic thought. But if it defines Islamic, it defines justice in Islamic terminology, which means that it should not be relative but absolute. Absolute can only be in a situation when its source provides support for absoluteness. All concept of justice, whether French, German, American, Chinese, are relative, subject to a group of people, a specific time, a specific situation. When it is time to go and hit Hiroshima, then all concepts of adl and justice and truthfulness and humanity are shelved. In the books, it is never said it was a genocide, criminal act by Americans, they must repent and make a public apology for that. No book written in American history says this. That means that act is justified at some level, which is contrary to Islamic thought. Islamic thought means that if a Khalifa, without referring to Islamic concept of adl, picks up a bucket full of gold coins and gives to a poet because he is Khalifa, then this act is not Islamic, although he is calling himself Khalifa. This is a misuse of power, this is a breach of trust of the people. It's not his personal property to go and distribute whatever he wants, which has been done. A so-called Khalifa of Umayyads, Abbasis or anyone regime feels happy with a scholar, with a poet, with anyone, says take this 10,000 gold seals and deliver to him. Does he have this authority? Does his wearing a beautiful jubba and abaya and amama make this act Islamic? Therefore, what we are saying here is that Islamic thought is not necessarily by any ideas given by Muslims, nor it is a matter of non-Muslims always giving you a wrong approach. But if a non-Muslim somehow brings an absolute value, which is our value, and based on that, then that thought can be categorized as Islamic. Absoluteness is necessary. We will talk more about it when we discuss epistemology, where what is Islamic theory of knowledge and how knowledge comes into existence. Well, I am glad that we are now trying to achieve what I was always expecting, your input, your interaction. This is not a lecture, this is not a class, this is not a classroom environment, it is an assembly of colleagues who need to respond and disagree. You do not have to agree with me at all. My purpose is to just touch on those areas which in our view as university are important for faculty members to understand. It is only when they understand and keep on thinking on these issues, then we deliver knowledge to our students, or else we are communicating information which is printed in books, which is in Wikipedia, which is on net available. We are just providing that. You do not have to now ask a student to come to a lab to do a number of things. He can have all that on net available, how things operate, how things are done. But what you need to do is knowledge, which means interaction, which means critical thinking. So, secular thought is based on the assumption that empirical reality is ultimate reality. Life, space and time is dualistic. Therefore, certain activities are religious, sacred, spiritual and holy, while others are worldly, material or secular or profane. Now, we are trying to compare what we defined as Islamic thought, and we are saying how we look on ideas which are called secular. Does wearing a three-piece suit, a tie and a hat and carrying a cigar makes a person secular? Or when a person with a beautiful amama and jubba and beard is giving a lecture and saying, "Oh people, this is day of Jummah, which means you must have piety and taqwa and generosity and not to be extravagant," and he inspires all of us. But when it is time to get his daughter married, he says she must go to only our brotherly. I will not accept this proposal from a PhD, but not from a brotherly. When the time for wedding comes, then he and his family say, our daughter must go to a beauty parlor for 4.5 hours and must come back with all kind of cosmetics and place in front of 300 guests on a stage. Why? Because if I do not do that, my brotherly will say, what kind of marriage is that? They were tired of their daughter, they just threw her away. They did not give her her due and respect. When these two things are done, then the Maulana, who has beautiful jubba and amama and talks about austerity, simplicity and taqwa, is believing in what is said here, dualistic view of life. which means two standards. A standard for your oration and second standard for your own action. Therefore, a person who is visibly, apparently very Islamic does not make him Islamic if the outcome, if the input, if whatever the person is doing does not provide evidence. Islamic thought means that thought which does not separate between these two realms. We have been hearing for centuries, this is deen, this is dunya. Therefore, I must do umrah for my deen, go to masjid for my deen, grow a beard for my deen, but never come to my office on time, never deliver most recent knowledge to my students, never devote time in examining their question papers objectively, but weighing them in a scale. How many pages are written by a person? If someone has written 95 pages instead of 20, I give him an A. This means that I am living in two different worlds, a world of deen, a world of dunya. Iqbal very beautifully puts and says that there is no separation between two spaces, a space and time which is sacred, a space and time which is secular. He says that this is a spirit manifested in space time. A spirit is not something other than body. It is manifested, it reveals itself in human action. We will talk later about it when we come to what Iqbal thinks about Islamic thought. Right now, the idea was, from the beginning we define how we can draw a line between Islamic thought and secular thought. A question will be that when I am teaching anatomy, am I teaching dunya or deen? The answer is very simple. If you teach anatomy simply as a physical phenomena, you are teaching only dunya. But if you are teaching anatomy as a system by a designer who knew where to put these two eyes and a nose, nose could be put on top of our head and could do same function. We could smell. It will be a curved structure on our top of the head with which we can smell things. But with that structure, can we take every morning a shower? Perhaps not. Can we swim? Perhaps not. If you have been used to swimming, tell me, if your nose angle is slightly different, can you swim? That means it is not a biological structure. By accident, by a blast, that it came into existence from a unicellular to a complex structure, which we apply in all sciences. In social sciences, we say from a primitive society to developed society, an evolutionary process. From human being, we say from a unicellular to multicellular structures, and all those are explained physically, not holistically. Therefore, Islamic knowledge is holistic. It is not confined to simply the biological, physiological aspect, but why is physiology, why this biology? Why not something different? Why ears are like this? Why these curves? Why a tunnel? Why a drum? Why some wax? Is it just a matter of refuse from the body, or a matter of an antibiotic that comes and helps in keeping my audition clear and safe from all kind of infections? Why is it so? Who is doing it? Is it just body regulating itself? Therefore, when I am teaching anatomy and physiology or physics or chemistry, then I have to address myself with a different approach, and that makes my thought Islamic, and that takes me away from a dualism of space and time, living in two worlds at one time. A world of so-called excellence, glamour, impact factors, and a world of just never caring about impact factor and making tahajjud and sleeping in the day. Both are dualism. A very good act apparently to make tahajjud and miss your class, in my definition, is secular, because I am defining tahajjud as religious and not my class as religious. So the words used here are not so difficult, but the concept I wanted to share with you. Yes.
So can we draw a line between dualistic, the secular thought or the Islamic thought, because most of the body of knowledge, especially in the research domain, that books we are studying, the research papers we are studying, is totally based on secular thought. Islamic content is quite missing to an extent, but obviously holistic approach is there. So can we draw a clear line? Can we segregate both them? Because in my point of view, both complements each another in our perspectives. But mostly the contribution in body of knowledge is totally based on secular thought. So how we can make a mixture of it?
I think we are discussing issues a bit ahead of time, but no problem at all. You know, when we say this is secular and this is sacred, it means that it is Friday, I must take a shower, put a nice dress and take off my shoes when I enter masjid. But on same day, after Jummah prayer, when I go to parliament, I don't have to have wudu, I don't have to take off my shoes, I just walk in and make a fiery speech. And then I assume I did my service to my God by going to Jummah, my service to my people by giving a fiery speech in parliament. That means balancing, complementing what is sacred and what is secular, by a crude example. Okay. What we mean by Islamized or Islamic thought or knowledge is, the person, when he is giving a fiery speech in parliament, must have full consciousness of presence in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not people, and then talking about the opposition party's leader and blaming him for 95 things he has never done. Which means his speech in parliament is not just a debate against the opposition, but a matter of bearing witness. He went to masjid to bear a witness. It is a shahada, witness. Allah, I am not great, although I am the chief of my tribe, so I bow down in front of you. Allah, I am not most intelligent, but you are most intelligent, so I am reciting your name and your kalam. I have done everything to prove by evidence of bowing down, putting my forehead on floor, standing, shivering, crying, everything, that I am zero, you are everything. But when I enter parliament, I am leader of the house, they did not stand up for me, did not clap for me, let me expel them from my party. Is this act a continuation or a separation? When we have this separation, we have dualism. Even when we balance by not being rude and rough with my party members, but drawing a line that there I was a very humble, docile, polite, submissive person, but here I am a parliamentarian and leader of a party, so I have every right to abuse others. This attitude is completely opposite. So, Islamic thought means, and you are correct, we will talk more about this in epistemology, and we will say that the empiricist model of thought in which you and me are raised, which we have been teaching all our life, is one domain, while holistic paradigm of knowledge, where you have integration, not separation, is something different, and that calls for a complete review of basic premises. I do not want to be personal, but in 1970s we established an association of Muslim social scientists in America, and I was founding secretary general, the later president of the association. The idea was that social scientists from North America, Canada and other places, they get together periodically and they discuss these issues, and I was asked for the same reason to build a whole faculty in Malaysia based on that concept in the Islamic University of Malaysia, and I had to spend 4 years in doing that in Malaysia. So, it is not just a hypothetical position. I am fully aware of these problems in social sciences, in physical sciences, applied sciences, and that is why in this interaction I felt that whatever I have learned is to be shared with my colleagues. So, we have a continuity of thought of the university mission. University's mission is not just excellent knowledge, but integration of Islamic values. When I wrote it, I knew what I am writing. The mission statement is not something like a poetic couplet, but it is based on a background, and that background is very clear to me at least. Okay. Islamic thought is founded on origin of all knowledge and human thought in the divine guidance or wahi. That whatever knowledge we have, whether physical, human, acquired knowledge, it has to have a source. It presupposes that human reason is finite and subjective. You may have encyclopedic knowledge. The whole Macropedia and Micropedia of Britannica is memorized by you, and you can give us answers to questions without difficulty, but can that be claimed holistic knowledge? Still finite. Your hard disk, you say, has abundance of space and it can take all these lectures and everything. Having said all that, can it still be claimed as total knowledge? Therefore, human knowledge, and the more we specialize, the more small we know. The nanotechnology expert goes to the nano part of a substance, but does he also know nano parts of all substances? He is more specialized in that specific area. You may have in future ENT specialist of right nostril and left nostril separately, and right and left eye separately, and they say, my specialist is only right ear, I cannot deal with left ear, because macro level of knowledge. But does that mean infinite? Not at all. It means more finite. So, the more we go in depth, the more finite we are, while knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the opposite. It's comprehensive, and therefore revealed knowledge has to be the basis for so called human knowledge to be created. Though okay, is finite subjective, thus it alone cannot be ultimate guide, though it can lead man to the need of ultimate truth. The more we investigate and do research, makes us convinced that there has to be something other than what we know. What we know is definitely an achievement, is something very valuable, but what we don't know is perhaps much more. Black holes, we were very glad we discovered black holes, but did we revisit black holes? Did we travel there with a supersonic and came back with samples and show that this is the dust, this is the substance, this is how it is, how it operates? Bermuda Triangle. You think of any phenomena in our own lifetime, do we have any scientific evidence for that? So with all our, therefore what said here is that it can lead man to the need of ultimate truth. Islamic thought is produced through realization of Tawheed in life and use of methodology of ijtihad in all human actions. Again, very simple sentence. I don't use terminologies to horrify you, but very simple sentences. Nevertheless, these sentences call for further elaboration. When we say that Islamic thought is produced through realization of Tawheed in life, it means that Tawheed is not a matter of just confession of faith, but it's a matter of its realization in how to make tea, how to drink water, how to dress, how to build economic system, how to make a nuclear bomb. If all these aspects are in the light of Tawheed, then our scientific research and development is Islamized. If it is beyond, without Tawheed, then we are not producing Islamic thought. And in, the methodology needed for that is of ijtihad. We will talk about it also later in more detail. Right now, simply the term needs to be understood. Ijtihad has the root word jahada in Arabic, and jahada means to strive, to struggle, to exert, while the technical meaning of the term is innovative approach in a specified area. It is not confined to so called personal matters of talaq and nikah or interest, but it is a general term which applies in every aspect of life. Islamization of thought means translation of Tawheed and Adl in social, political, economic, legal, educational and cultural domains. Do we have Lahore and Peshawar with us, and any questions coming up in your mind when we are talking about these issues? Please don't hesitate, we can hear you. Okay. So, Islamization of thought refers to translation of Tawheed and Adl in social, political, economic, legal, educational and cultural domains. It does not refer to biological and natural sciences, but it is assumed to exist there. So, it also means liberation of human mind and thought from man-made philosophies and ideologies, Eurocentrism and positivism. Two new terms are used. One is Eurocentrism and the other is positivism. Eurocentrism means that when we in this part of the world, Pakistan and subcontinent or some other places, when we are educated in a Eurocentric paradigm of knowledge, where everything is Europe based. When I ask you, sir, what is the time? You say it's 8:30 a.m. What does that mean? that means plus 5 hours of GMT. जी वालेकुम सलाम।
मैं पिशावर से
जी फरमाइए।
बात कर रही हूँ
जी।
सर। हमारे स्लाइड जो आप हमें पढ़ा रहे हैं ये हमारे साथ चेंज नहीं हो रही।
सॉरी, मैं पढ़ा कुछ भी नहीं रहा, पढ़ रहा हूँ आप लोगों से, लेकिन स्लाइड चेंज होनी चाहिए बहरहाल। क्यों भाई, क्या मसला है?
थैंक यू सर।
स्लाइड क्यों नहीं चेंज हो रही? ये आप जहन से निकाल दें कि मैं पढ़ा रहा हूँ। आई एम नॉट अ टीचर, आई एम ए लर्नर। सो आई एम हियर जस्ट टू हेल्प यू ऑन दीज वेरियस पॉइंट्स। ये तब आगे चले गए मौलाना। जो सेकेंड पॉइंट वॉज दैट what is meant by Islamization of thought is liberation of human mind and thought from man-made philosophies, which means not to be gripped by them. Knowledge of Western thought is necessary. Knowing it is part of our endeavor. But if we are confined in it, imprisoned in it, then we have some problem. What is said here is that we should not be imprisoned in human thought, which comes mainly from two approaches or two systems. One is Eurocentrism, other is positivism. Eurocentrism means that when Europe is at the center, I said that when you look for your time, that time is how many hours plus or minus from GMT. If you are defining that I come from Pakistan or Afghanistan, which is in South Asia, or I come from Malaysia, Southeast Asia, what does that mean? Southeast Asia of what? Of Makkah Mukarramah or London? Which means that the world map has you as center. You decide who is your south and east and west. This is meant by Eurocentrism. But it's not only in history. Therefore, all history taught to you, to my teachers, my parents and grandparents, was based on Piccadilly Street, Waterloo, war of so and so. Those were historic events that made my mind of history. Never ask a student who is studying in A level, O level with the Oxford University Press books, where is Checha Watni? They will have no idea. But they can tell you which street goes to city center in London, because their textbook, literature, drama, short story, everything talks about those streets and those persons. So you don't have your own concept of history, time, anything. Every book that deals with scientific history tells you dark ages, which are your bright ages. When Muslims were at the height of technology, that was the darkest period of Europe, but they teach you dark history and put you in dark history, part of that. Which means that we may like it or we may never like it. We are imprisoned in that. So unless you liberate your mind from that grip, you cannot have objective thought. Your feelings, your benchmarks are subjective. When you say neatness, clean society, tidiness, what is meant by that? Tidiness means what tidiness exists in a house in London or Paris. How they arrange flowers, in which room they call master bedroom, which room they call guest bedroom, which room they call sitting lounge. If you have that design of your home, you are a modern, civilized person. If it is different, you are primitive. What's of your own? Nothing.
We have everything in that one. We have TV room, this, but we don't have a prayer hall in that. कि कभी नमाज पढ़नी हो तो फिर जगह नहीं मिलती हमारे घरों में, बिकॉज वी हैव गॉट द डाइनिंग हॉल हमारा अलग, टीवी रूम अलग, सब कुछ. लेकिन किसी घर में बिकॉज ये जब बात होती है लोगों से तो कहते हैं हमने कोई प्रेयर के लिए हॉल या प्रेयर वाली अलग जगह, ताकि कभी नमाज घर में भी पढ़नी पड़े तो कैसे पढ़ें, ख़वातीन कैसे पढ़ें. सो दिस इज़ वही आपका जो कि हमारा सेंटर क्या है, वहाँ से हमें क्या डिज़ाइन मिला हुआ है. सो वी आर फॉलोइंग दैट डिज़ाइन. देयर इज़ नो स्पेस फॉर प्रेयर.
जी डॉक्टर साहब, आपका जो स्पेशलाइजेशन है उसके अंदर जब आप ये कहते हैं डेवलपमेंट, व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय दैट? इज इट मैक्स वेबर who tells you what is development, or someone else? What Max Weber tells you is repeated by the whole generation of scholars as development. When we say economic development, what do we mean by that? That means certain benchmarks, that you must have that many factories, that many roads, that many houses in a town with this kind of facilities. Economic development. Where is your own development concept? Therefore, whatever in social sciences or applied sciences we are teaching has this problem of Eurocentricism, one single word. And second word used here is positivism, which I mentioned earlier also, that Auguste Comte, a French philosopher of 18th century, he came up with the idea that there are different ages of humanity. Age of superstition or mythology, age of speculation or philosophy, and age of positivism. The first one for him was the age of religion. It was mythology and superstition. Second was the age of philosophy, the whole Greek thought and Western emancipation. And lastly, age of positivism, which means that age of empirical reality. What is empirically measurable is ultimate. All your research dealing with the chemistry, biology, anatomy, philosophy, political science is based on quantitative methods, which mean empirical reality. Professor Nawar mentioned in the beginning that there are some areas which are other than rational. Now, whatever experience you are having by sitting in presence of some persons who in your view are spiritualists, a feeling of contentment, enlightenment, satisfaction, or whatever you call it, do you have a parameter empirically to measure that? Then is it there or no? If it exists as an experience and you cannot measure empirically, then we have a dilemma. Either benchmarks have problem or you have problem. I will not say who has problem, but all I can say is presence of this dilemma indicates, and that is not what I am saying. Claude Lévi-Strauss, a sociologist from France, and Marcel Yardet, again from France, both of them are pioneers in study of world civilization from a mythological viewpoint. And they say our whole discipline is irrelevant if empirical reality is benchmark. Mythology cannot be empirically measured and explained. So, it is not that we from Islamic viewpoint are questioning, but the very basis of positivism and empiricism has been questioned. Same Karl Popper at philosophical level, he has questioned empirical thought at philosophical level and others. The idea here was that we need to liberate our minds from those philosophies in which we are born and raised and made intellectuals. It calls for reconstruction of social, political, legal, economic and religious thought in the light of the I have not left religious thought away from it, because I believe religious thought is also divided, is secular. Any religious writing which assumes deen and dunya separation is secular writing. It is not providing holistic Islamic approach. Holistic Islamic approach alone can be called Islamic thought, otherwise it is suffering from the same problem. So, when we come to the Islamic thought like political thought, social thought, legal thought, then I hope you will bear with me my blunt comments that we need to Islamize Sharia. What is known as Sharia discipline suffers from this problem, division. But when we come to that point, then we will discuss it in more detail. Okay, next slide. The term used as the title of this semester's interaction, Islamic thought and culture. Till now we were trying to understand what is thought and what is Islamic thought. These 2 points have been discussed in my first interaction with you and partly in the second discourse with you. Now, let us see what is the meaning of culture. Usually we refer to culture when you find a Balochi dance and not something other than dance. Culture brings to our mind music and dance. Unfortunately, it is not like that, something different. Driven from Latin cultura, which the verb colere, culture means cultivation. It may also mean husbandry. Christian authors use it in the sense of worship. It also means training of mind, faculties, manners and training of body. A British scholar, Matthew Arnold, interprets it as the study and pursuit of perfection. Now, that is how, to begin with, we find culture is defined, and the later book you find here by Kluckhohn is a very good study on this subject. It covers around 100 definitions of culture spread over 3 centuries of Western thought. He has started from 16th century till 21st century and picked up important definitions and tried to elaborate those in that book. Very, very interesting book. So, culture in brief means training of mind, faculties and manners, how we behave, how we think, how we respond. Culture or civilization is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, law, morals, customs and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a value of society. This is a definition by Edward Burton Tyler, a well known British anthropologist. He was regarded father of anthropology till recently by most of the writers. In his definition, you find culture is not just dances or music, but he is referring to intellectual, religious, moral, customary, all those aspects. Then Herder, a very well known German philosopher, culture is a progressive cultivation or development of faculties. When we develop our faculties of thinking, analysis, etc., then a British poet and literary figure, T.S. Eliot, thinks culture is not merely the sum of several activities, but a way of life. It's a very different approach than others. He is not approaching it from anthropological viewpoint, but from a literary viewpoint. Therefore, he is saying that it is a way of life. He further says, the primary channel of transmission of culture is the family, and when family life fails to play its part, we must expect our culture to deteriorate. Again, a very important word of wisdom given by him, that culture is conveyed not by just universities and colleges, but culture is conveyed from family. Therefore, if you want to correct terrorism in any place of the world, it cannot be by bullets, by destroying villages, by killing, but only by reverting to the source. Family should provide environment. When family is not providing environment, then the child is carried away by his peer group, by his friends, by environment, and all that ultimately makes him develop dual personality, one in home, other outside. So, it carries enormous wisdom when he is talking about. He also makes a very interesting statement, and looks like had deep impact of faith in his personal life. The dominant force in creating a common culture between people, each of which has its distinct culture, is religion. Please do not at this point make a mistake in anticipating my meaning. This is not a religious talk, and I am not setting out to convert anybody. I am simply stating a fact. It is Christianity that our art have developed. It is in Christianity that the laws of Europe have until recently been rooted. If Christianity goes, the whole of our culture goes. See, a very blunt but very analytical approach of a person.
Which century was that when he
Ji?
stated this? Which century was that when he stated this?
He was poet laureate of Queen Elizabeth now. He died in 60s or 70s.
You could have not said this century ago.
No. Recent person, contemporary, and his writings are part of any master's PhD program of literature. His poetry is part of that. T.S. Eliot is a name in literature, English literature. So, very interesting. You only replace Christianity with Islam, and that's all. And that is the main purpose of whole effort in our education. Through our education and media, our faith is thrown out. Once it is thrown out, then you have no more space to stand. You have no more feet. You just you are rootless. So anyone can carry you anywhere they want. So very interesting. So it also shows what is relation between these two concepts, religion and culture. But for us, these are not two separate concepts. For us, since we believe in a holistic approach of knowledge, which we will further elaborate later on, but right now culture for us is not just some manifestations or just some ideas, but it is a totality. हमारे पेशावर और लाहौर के साथियों के पास ये ईमेल हुए होंगे पॉइंट्स, तो आपके सामने प्रिंट आउट होना चाहिए ना, या नहीं है? आप प्रिंट आउट नहीं है आपके पास? डू यू हैव प्रिंट आउट विद यू? लाहौर एंड पेशावर प्लीज. ये जो आज का डिस्कशन है
जी सर, आज हमें अपने
जी, आपके पास है इसके ईमेल हो चुका है ना?
सर आज ही मिली है, अभी सुबह.
मिल गया, अच्छा बहुत शुक्रिया. कम से कम वो आप खोल लें. अगर लेक्चर पॉइंट्स स्क्रीन पे नहीं आ रहे तो वो अपने सामने रखिए ताकि जो एलेबोरेशन है वाजे हो जाए.
अब ठीक हो गया हमारा.
अच्छा, थैंक यू वेरी मच.
सर ये
Thank-
सेकंड है, लास्ट वीक ये ईमेल हो चुके हैं,
अच्छा अच्छा
सेकंड लेक्चर चल रहा है।
जी, सेकंड है जी. हाँ, ये ईमेल हो चुका है सबको जी. हमेशा कहता है कि अगर ये टेक्नोलॉजी काम न भी करे तो कम से कम प्रिंट आउट सामने होना चाहिए. अच्छा ना, अच्छा, द वर्ड civilization, what is meaning of civilization? It has been variously defined as a cultural area, a collection of cultural characteristics and phenomena. A particular concentration of worldview, customs, structures and culture, both material and high culture. That's how Wallerstein defines this in his book. In the 19th century France, the term civilization was used exactly in the same sense as Germans use the term culture. Again, they refer to the same book, Kroeber. A particular original process of cultural creativity, which is the work of a particular people, defined by Dawson. A civilization is a totality, Matthew Malko. These are definitions. Again, civilization and culture both refer to the overall way of life of a people, and a civilization is a culture writ large, that is, which envelops everything. They both involve values, norms, institutions and modes of thinking to which successive generations in a given society have attached primary importance. अब देखिए, जो हम यहाँ पे महसूस कर रहे हैं इन डेफिनीशंस के आने के साथ साथ, वो ये कि अर्लियर यू आर हैविंग डेफिनीशन ऑफ थॉट, देन कल्चर, देन सिविलाइजेशन. नाउ यू आर ग्रेजुअली ट्राइंग टू सी that they are merging together, and you have in front of you a definition that does not separate completely civilization from culture. In our own mindset, when you talk about civilization, then your intellectuals of this country, they say our civilization is in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. This is what you are taught in textbook of 5th grade. Is that your civilization, your culture? Should you feel proud of inheriting Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, or otherwise? Which means that the colonial education or Eurocentric education still penetrates in the minds of your own children. Students who come to you are product of that paradigm, that model, and it's not easy at all to shake up that model. It is just like some young girl was married in a place which was near a tannery, where they dry hides and color them, and when she reached there, she said to her mother-in-law, "Mama, what is this? I cannot live here. So bad smell. How can you live here?" Next day again, "Mama, I cannot eat, I cannot dress, I am tired of it." Till 3 weeks passed. Then she had no more any complaint. She was used to it. We are used to this education given to us from childhood. Can you smell something different? जी
जब से मैंने थोड़ा सा कुरान और हदीस की तरफ ज़्यादा टाइम देना शुरू कर दिया आई फील
वही that's why we are saying reveal knowledge. Why we are saying reveal knowledge? We are saying when you enter domain of reveal knowledge, then you start feeling the smell or bad smell of other areas. Otherwise you will have bearded, turbaned Muslim scholars who are teaching Weber, Adam Smith, your gurus of management science. This is what Peter Drucker has said, which is the ultimate truth. This is what Stephen Covey says, ultimate truth. This is what so and so has said, ultimate truth. And this is marketing, this is public relationing, this is business management. That's what you do. Business models, all business models are based on that paradigm. How to fool your customer. I am using blunt words, but they say how to sell your product with a smiling face, stab your customer. This is the art of management.
tactics and cheating.
So anyhow, if you are born in that culture, it's not easy at all. It takes enormous courage and critical approach to come out of it, and much more effort to rebuild, reconstruct a new paradigm. I mentioned since 1970 I am involved in this enterprise, and I am still working hard to reconstruct areas which I believe I can do something. So it's not easy at all. Okay. A civilization is thus the highest cultural grouping of people and the broadest level of cultural identity people have. It is defined both by common objective elements such as language, history, religion, customs, institutions, and by the subjective self-identification of people. Civilizations are mortal but also very long-lived. ये well talked about person सैम हंटिंगटन ये बात कहता है, जो मोस्ट रिसेंट कोट है हमारी इस एफर्ट में कि आप उलमाए कराम के सामने ये जो अल्फाज हैं, थॉट है, सिविलाइजेशन है, कल्चर है, इसके माने और मफहूम आ जाए. जस्ट टू लेट यू बी एक्सपोज टू द मीनिंग ऑफ दीज टर्म्स. आई हैव ट्राइड टू पुट दीज थिंग्स. Arnold J. Toynbee, a historian, talks about rise of civilization as a response to challenge. Just forget about it. Anyhow, let's see what's the meaning of values. जी
Empirically difficult to
जी
measure.
The term value, Latin valere, to be strong, to be worth, generally refers to an ideal, purpose, objective or goal as object of life or assigned preference over other considerations, which means that value refers to both its economic dimension and conceptual dimension. Economic means worth. Does it matter? At the same time conceptual, what is the most important thing? मसलन हम ये कहते हैं कि कौमों के लिए सबसे अहम चीज़ कौमों की हमीयत और उनकी अना है. अगर आप हमीयत अपनी बेच दें, फिर जो चाहे आपसे कोई काम ले ले. हम ये क्यों कहते हैं? इसलिए कहते हैं कि दिस इज़ दी एन इम्पॉर्टेंट वैल्यू. But is this the only value or other values as well? From where it comes? What's the origin? Is it a matter of our own consensus that makes it important or something else? So value refers to that which is objective, which is goal, which is preferred over other things. आज हम कहते हैं कि money is value. We never say time is value, no? We say money is value. My time is worth that much. If I am a super lawyer, then my every minute is worth so many millions of rupees for consultancy. Everything is measured or valued in terms of money. Education same. Which education is better, where you have to pay more tuition? Okay. In the hierarchy of values, some values are regarded intrinsic, which means basic, essential or fundamental, while others are considered instrumental. For example, adl, equity and justice is essential value, while hurriya or freedom is instrumental. Adl, to be fair, is the basic value, while to have liberty and freedom of choice is subsidiary to it. Therefore, values may always have a hierarchy. Values are classified according to various people differently. For example, we have moral values, aesthetic values, religious values, family values, economic values, political values, legal values, customary values with customs, social values, spiritual values, literary values. You can keep on adding to it, but all these values, the question remains, when we say certain family values, does it mean family values in the Waziri tribes or Mahsood tribes or Kakal tribes, or in all of them? When we say economic values, then economic values in China or in Europe or in America, or all are same, which means although we classify them, but with this classification we do not know ultimately meaning of values. Political values, in political values in Britain, in France, in America, in our country may be completely different. Crossing floor, is it political value? Using language which is indecent in parliament, calling someone ignoramus, ignorant, or sir, you are less knowledgeable, which is parliamentarian? Values, political values, which means it depends on various places. So, with all this classification, we cannot still claim that political values are one and same. They have to be different. Now, how philosophers look on values? Ji?
So we can say that the values we discussed, they are basically relative values to time and space, and they change from one place to another.
Ji.
So they are not basically absolute terms like we discussed before, like political values.
Ji.
They are subjected to change.
Ji. You are very much correct, because that is what you and me are told. We are told that in everything there is an evolution in values, in your thought, in your health, in your language, in everything, which means what was yesterday may not be true today, which means values of 1920, values of 1970 and 2010 may be completely different. This is what you and me are fed in a paradigm in which we are living presently. But let us try to find out, is this the only valid paradigm and way of thinking, or can there be some other way of thinking as well? Okay. What was the last one? Oh, yeah. The philosophical view of ultimate values, you remember we said that these are classification of values. Now what we are saying here is that there are certain values which are assumed by philosophers as ultimate. Aristotle and among Christian philosophers, Thomas Aquinas, very well known Christian scholar, they think happiness is ultimate value. To achieve happiness, why you go to school? To get education, so I can get a job that will make me happy. Why do you want to get married? Because I expect my wife will bring a Mercedes Benz, a refrigerator, a plot given to her, and I will be very comfortable and rich, happy. So for some philosophers, happiness is the ultimate. For others, pleasure, which is called hedonism or hedonistic approach, which means we do everything for pleasure. Why in the Roman theatre the ruler or the ruling class would like slaves to be thrown in front of hungry lions? When they tear them up, they laugh. Pleasure. This is history, this is not fiction, history, for pleasure. So everything we do is for pleasure. Why a person drinks? Why a person works like a donkey or a horse whole week and on weekend goes to a pub, eats a lavish dinner and drinks, and while coming back in an accident dies? Because he wanted to have pleasure, nothing more. Whole week working to drink most expensive liquor. Then humanity, and that goes to Chinese philosophy, where Zen is the term used for humanity, and propriety, Li, which means your relationship with your family. All this is considered as highest value when you are achieving something for humanity. Nietzsche, very much liked by Allama Iqbal, he talks about power, that achievement of power. Therefore, Nazism was a manifestation of Nietzsche's philosophy, that we must be the world power based on Aryan race superiority. Authenticity, Jean-Paul Sartre is a French scholar, existentialist. He thinks that whatever is authentic experience is the ultimate truth or purpose or goal or value in life. Having said that, which is a very quick and very sketchy review of philosophy, we can summarize our whole discussion of values till now, also raised in a question by one of our colleagues, that values, whether of philosophers or politicians or others, are considered as rooted in local customs and traditions in Greek, in Africa, in Asia, anywhere else. These local customs become social habits and behavior of people, and when these continue, they are known as ethical values. So ethical values are an outcome of a social evolution. In sociology, we use the term social construct. This means exactly the same thing, that values are social construct, which means a society makes value. Why certain people cover their whole body except their face? It's a compulsion by society or something different? Did Arabs like to cover their whole body except face, and therefore when Islam came, then it was made compulsory for women and mostly for men also. Is it Arabian custom and culture which has been imposed and evolved and called Islamic value? Therefore you find most of historians and many people who have not done study of Islam properly, they say that these punishments of cutting hand, whipping and asking women to cover themselves, all this is Arabian customs which have been imposed on us. I don't blame them, because whatever they are saying is a result of the paradigm we are discussing. In that paradigm of knowledge, where evolutionary process is true in everything, they must say it. They cannot say otherwise, because they are prisoners of their culture. Unless they come out of that culture, they will not be able to see it differently. I am not making any comment, is it good or bad? I am just sharing with you a phenomena as understood and mentioned. I am not saying covering is good or bad. All I am saying is, people think that those who cover, they are compelled by Arabian culture to do it, and the root of that statement is in this evolutionary process of mind within the paradigm, not outside the paradigm. मौलाना जब वक्त हो जाए तो बता दीजिएगा. The Islamic paradigm, these are very simple diagrams, but it took me quite long time to work on those and develop those, so I can share in simple language with my colleagues. It's not just picked up from Wikipedia or from some other books and then just shared with you. So the model in front of you says that divine guidance or wahi carries universal values, because only a body which is by itself not finite can provide infinite values. A body who is finite can only provide finite thought, not infinite thought. Since wahi is coming from infinite source, it provides universal values, not Pathan, Punjabi, Balochi, Sindhi values, in which we are still prisoners. We still say it is against our Pathan culture. कैसे हो जाएगा ये? Sindhi culture, Saraiki culture, Balochi culture. We keep on saying all these things, consciously and unconsciously both. So here the point is that divine values, they provide universal values, and that changes social custom and behavior. Whether you are a Baloch or a Nigerian tribe man, when you want to start your food, you wash your hands and say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's not Arabian custom, it's a divine value given by wahi, made a custom, not the reverse. You see, the whole sociology and psychology and anthropology is based on this diagram. The anthropologist goes to African tribes with a binocular, with a camera. He makes snaps, half naked, dances with colored body, brings all those, then says this is the culture, and writes a big thesis on that. Same is done by a psychologist. He goes to your development of ego and analyzes that. The same is done by a political scientist. He goes to different cultures, and same for any other disciplines that exist. So this is the root of all that problem which we are facing, and this is the solution to change the mindset completely.
Just want to add a comment that इंटेलेक्चुअल से लेकर
जी जी
एंड दिस इज द टॉप डाउन अप्रोच
जी
अल्लाह
जी
ताला से हमें जो चीज़ें आई हैं
जी
उसको हम बॉटम
जी
तक लाकर
जी
घर तक
जी
लाकर वो चुनकर लेके आ जाते हैं।
जी, आपने बहुत सही बात फरमाई, लेकिन जो बात मैं बार बार दोहरा रहा हूँ वो ये है कि हमारा ये कहना कि इज़ इट बॉटम अप और टॉप डाउन, these two terms are part of a tradition in which we are raised and born. Therefore, I cannot think otherwise. When I want to express myself, I am bound by those terms to explain. I hope you understand. This is the dilemma of intellectuals, and they must understand that. We academicians are the people who are always correct. When you are teaching any subject, may that be physics or theology or anything, then you are always correct, because you are in your own paradigm, never beyond that. I am not a skeptic, I am a complete against skepticism. I reject doubt completely. But what I am saying is that we must also realize our own existence intellectually. It's on a very fragile basis presently. It has to be on sound basis, and sound basis can only be when you have universal basis, not temporal, geographic, territorial basis. All knowledge that exists around is based on this territorial knowledge, not universal knowledge. हम जो कहते हैं कि जमहूरियत मसाइल का हल है, क्यों कहते हैं भाई? इसलिए कि हमारे सामने मॉडल है बरतानिया का, चूँकि वहाँ पे चलता है यहाँ भी चलेगा. सही तो नहीं है. It's not logical conclusion. A people who have certain respect for democratic norms and law and traditions, who have no constitution written, even constitution is not written for the Great Britain, but they follow it. We have a written constitution, we then follow it. So can you apply same model to a people who don't respect even a written constitution? Illogical. But since we are born and raised in that tradition, we recite Jamhuriyat, Jamhuriyat, Jamhuriyat from morning till night without knowing what we are saying. So, universal values act on social norms and customs. Therefore, wherever you go, you don't have to ask in Nigeria or in Spain in a Muslim home that is this tea halal or haram. You assume you are in a Muslim home, it must be halal, not haram. Is it because of Spain or Nigeria or Sri Lanka? Universal. So, custom, my drinking tea, my cooking food, my dress, everything ultimately becomes one and same and not localized and particular. Okay. That means there are values which are particular and values which are universal. Local, national and regional values and culture generally evolve into a particularistic vision and way of life, like Eurocentrism. Universal values are transcendent, go beyond and carry a global applicability, like truth. Can truth have a territory, nationality, language? Justice or adl, would it have a passport? No, it's everywhere. Trustworthiness, amana, should we say that a non-Amin parliamentarian should be Prime Minister? Nowhere in the world, not just Pakistan, it's global. Fulfillment of contracts or uqood, steadfastness or sabr, all these terms are used purposely to remind you that when the Quran talks about these terms, then these terms are not Arabian terms, Arabian values, but these are universal values given in Arabic language only. I always make a statement to annoy my Arab friends, and that is, Islam came to Islamize Arabs and not to Arabize others. जी
सुबह में थोड़ी सी कि जी कुरान को अरबी में इसलिए उतारा गया
जी जी
ताकि ये फिर बाद में क्वेश्चन ना हो कि ये तो अजमी
जी
और ज़बान में है
जी
तो इसलिए हम इसके जो है मानने से इनकारी या इसमें जो है ना
जी।
जानते हैं तो उनके लिए तो काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें जो है ना कर दी थी ताकि जो है ना
जी
वो मान जाए फिर भी उसके बावजूद भी ग्रुप्स जो बने और जो भी चलता रहा
जी Knowing Arabic does not mean someone knows the Quran. Abu Jahl was an expert in Arabic language. Same was Atba, their famous poet who came to have a dialogue with the Prophet. He was selected by the Quraysh because he was a supreme poet of his age to go and talk to him. And none of them, knowing Arabic, could appreciate the Quran, or appreciate it but had no courage to accept it. Therefore, we must separate the two. It's completely. A number of Arabian culture and ways were completely condemned and removed by Islam, because Islam is universal and Uruba or Arabism is particular. Universal values are absolute and are not variable, situational, relative or subject to social evolutionary process. ये जो कहते हैं कि जी ये फ़लाँ ख़ातून शटल कॉक बुर्क़ा पहने हुए तशरीफ़ लाई हैं, ये तो बड़ी बेइज्जती हो गई पूरे के पूरे माशरे की, उसे हम नाम ही देते शटल कॉक बुर्क़ा कहते हैं। बड़ी अगर कोई पेरिस में किसी गली के अंदर या न्यूयॉर्क में मैनहट्टन के अंदर कोई शौहर अपनी बीवी को वो पहना के निकले तो क्या दुनिया में कहीं भी उसको कबूल किया जाएगा एक महज़्ज़ब अलामत के तौर पर? यह कहा जाएगा कि लाहौल वला क़ुव्वत, ये कहाँ आ गए, ये लोग कौन हैं, ये अजीब चीज़ हैं, इनको निकालो यहाँ से, तबाह हो जाएगा हमारा कल्चर और माशरा। So the very concept of culture and everything based on evolution has led to that approach. The same lady who is wearing the so-called shuttlecock burqa, if she walks in hot pants, she is more than welcome, because they say this is our culture and very good Muslims are doing it, they are acceptable to us. But what does that mean? That means local values imposed on international community. The media today in our country is doing that job by transforming our mind and vision. So you keep on seeing obscenity, women with sleeveless dress, women with the embracing boys, and all those things which are part of our television culture, till you get used to it. Then you say, well, it's just normal, what can we do? We cannot control our boys and girls, they see everything, it's happening for 20 years now, it's okay with us. So this is the problem of this evolutionary empirical paradigm in which we are living, and not understanding what are universal values. Universal values address whole of humanity without discrimination of color, gender, race, language, territorial nationality or economic status. Whether a person is rich or poor or black or white or from any place, if there is a value of haya, if there is a value of honesty, then it must reside in the person, or the person is not acting Islamically. Till now no question from our daughters, no question, very strange. Usually they say it's girls who dominate in our country, in our academia, in most of exams, intermediate, you have toppers from girls.
They are best listeners.
Ji?
They are best listeners.
So it looks like, so I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Yes, please.
Probably by the end of this course, I'll have you will probably give us a suggestion and I'll have an answer. लेकिन लगता है ऐसे कि you want us to question and challenge what has been fed to us, but there are so many things that limit us. And you said that alternative lifestyle is not easy to
Yeah,
follow.
yeah.
So it looks like you want us to grow a kitchen garden in our backyard and stop dealing with any merchants or anybody who wants to sell us something.
Yeah. Not exactly. What I want to see is a huge farm, not a garden in the back of the town of the house, but a huge factory and a huge garden where we are producing things which are for the benefit of humanity, but not for the pure entrepreneurial enterprise of the capitalist. The difference is substantial. Why a person who is a millionaire wants to become a billionaire at the cost of poor man's money? Nothing wrong in having a multinational industry in 10 parts of the world, but based on universal values of adl, of equity, of honesty. Not that when you, those of you who are from pharmaceutics, go and check any pharmacy and find out what are 10 different brands of multivitamin. Each one will have a beautiful colorful sticker with certain things bold, daily requirements, so and so and so and so. And the most costly one will be the one which says only one pill a day and you are full of energy. But when you read carefully a thin line which says the National Drug Agency has not determined daily requirement of this, although the big sticker says it meets everything. Okay? Salesmanship. Is this honesty, fairness? And if you chemically classify, you will find that a daily multivitamin which is sold for 300 rupees has exactly same ingredients as for 3000 rupees. Is that fairness? That means regulation at national regulatory body. Instead of brand names, generic names. Instead of full liberty, they must make profit, why not? But a limit. Therefore, we would like to have top industrial development, agricultural development, but not with the paradigm of capitalism, where the capitalist enjoys. The fact of the matter is, capitalism is no different than a big fish among small fishes, not only bullying them, threatening them, but swallowing them and becoming more and more big. This is zulm, not adl. Therefore, when we talk about universal values, it means we are saying from the beginning, values must be applicable, not just ideal, applicable. These values, can we say any one of these values is not applicable? Can we say that we are compelled to lie? Can we say we are compelled to do zulm? Can we say we are bound to break our contracts? When I make a contract as a teacher that I will be devoting my X hours for teaching and research, and when I come to university I pick up telephone and talk with real estate agents how I can multiply my wealth and go to class by using 20 years old notes, and I am fulfilling contract. You see, these values are not abstract, these are universal and applied, but the problem is we have distanced these values. These values do not proliferate in our education system. Our storybooks, our literature, history, nothing refers to these values, but refers to certain political manipulations. A ruler occupied huge lands of surrounding neighbors, we say he is a great Akbar. What makes him great Akbar? Killing others, taking their share? No, it's wrong history. We should call the person usurper, not great. So since we are, and again I will repeat, since we are born and raised in a value system and we don't come out of it and look critically, therefore we cannot see the difference. The point is not to isolate or withdraw or to leave the world and become a hermit and say this is all bad, let me go to a forest and live there. No. The idea is these values must operationalize at personal level, at family level, at educational level, at economic level, at political level, and that's how the change begins. Ji? Waqt? Presentation? Ji, better. So we stop here. We'll continue inshallah.